Hey, this is Phil Carlton, and I want to welcome you today. Remember, you can find me here on YouTube and subscribe if you want to be updated when I post new videos. And you can also find me over on Facebook under Premiere Plus Phil. So I hope you'll follow me there as well. So today I want to talk a little about working with existing designs and maybe editing parts of them and using them in other ways. And I'm going to start that by inserting a design. So when we insert a design rather than opening it, it brings a copy. So notice I have an untitled document in here. And if I go File, Insert, I'm going to be working with the design that we'll find in the Premiere Plus 2 or in Premiere Plus, Samples, Premiere Plus 2 EMB, the Stitch 2 folder, and Frames and Borders. And if I scroll down through these, I'm going to find this design called Flower Scroll, which may look familiar to you. I know it's been used in quite a few designs, but it's such a great design to kind of take apart and use elements from. Now, before I do anything else with this design, I do want to change the colors so it's a little easier for you to see what I'm doing. So I'm going to come over and double click on color number 1 and just change it to a dark gray color. Click OK. Then I'll double click on color number 2 in the color list, and I'm going to change it to a purple. That will just make the stitches a little bit easier to see as I'm overworking and modifying and changing it a little. Now I'm going to go to the Modify tab, and working in Premiere Plus 2 Embroidery, when you're in the Modify tab, it's going to let you select and copy and paste at the stitch level. Now before I do anything else, in the lower right hand corner I'm going to drag the zoom slider to the right a little until this design fills most of my screen. That should do it. And now I want to talk about just a couple of strategies you can use when you're selecting designs. So I want to talk about maybe isolating different parts of the design and finding some easier ways to get to them. The first thing I want to show is, say I want to use this bottom center piece, this curve, these little petals, and this curve right here. Now you'll notice that I have black stitches, or these gray stitches, that are running behind there. But when we're working on the Modify tab, in the color list over on the right, when you uncheck a color, it will hide those stitches. And if the stitches are hidden, you can't select them. So now I can use several of my selection tools. I'm going to start by using the freehand select, kind of like a lasso tool. When I select it, I'll have a little lasso on my cursor, and if I click and hold my mouse button and just drag a circle around what I want to select, when I lift up, I'll have selected just those stitches. Then I can click Copy. Now that piece is on my clipboard where I can go and I can work with it as a separate element. I'm going to click outside so nothing is selected, and across the top I'm going to click Draw All Stitches and talk about maybe the next one. So maybe I just want to select this little piece right here. I'm going to show a couple of different ways we can do that. First of all, again, if I uncheck color number 1, I'm going to zoom in even further. I'm going to drag the zoom slider because when I'm working here at the stitch level, I really need to sometimes see exactly what's happening. So I could try and use my lasso tool and kind of navigate right through there, and I made it that time, but that can be tricky. The freehand point select tool will help you when you're trying to get through really tight areas. Unlike the lasso where I just clicked and dragged, with the freehand point select, it's kind of like our manual digitizing tools where I can click to set points, and as I set those points, I can see the area it's selecting. Now when I click without any keyboard keys down, it's going to create these curves. If I click while I hold down the Control key on my keyboard, it's going to give me a corner point. And when you're navigating through tight areas, I'm going to hit another Control click here, and I can even click, and while I'm holding down my Control key, I'm still holding that line, and so I'm getting that nice sharp line. That's going to let me really nicely navigate through tight areas. Then I'm just going to click one more curve point here, or 2 more, and notice now I've got that nice curve. It's navigating right through this piece. Once I've made that selection, if I right click and click Copy, now I have just that single element to work with. Now there is an easier way to do this sometimes, so I want to zoom back out so I can see my entire design. I'm going to turn everything back on by clicking Draw All Stitches, and let me kind of adjust my view so I can see the whole piece. That'll work. Now I also have these sliders up at the top. This is the one that will show me the draw first visible stitch, and this is called the draw from start. And this one is called the draw from end, or shows me my last visible stitch. So this design has about 3,200 stitches. So if I drag this first slider to the right, it's showing me everything from like 1,600 on. So I'm seeing like the last half of my design. If I drag that all the way to the left, now it's showing me everything from stitch number 1 to stitch number 3200-ish. If I drag the bottom slider to the left, now it's showing me from stitch number 1 to about stitch number 1600. And you can use these to isolate different parts of the design. I'm going to draw stitching, so let me show you how that can really be helpful. So I'm going to click outside here for a second. By clicking there, I've deselected everything. Now if I watch, this will also let me kind of preview how the design is going to build. So I dragged the draw from end slider all the way to the left. Now I'm dragging it to the right, and it's showing me it's going to do this underlay, do all these black or these gray stitches, then come in here, do that flower, do these pieces right here, and then go down, do part of that, and travel on. So if I want to isolate just this piece right down here again, if I start dragging the draw from start slider to the right, it's going to begin by first hiding all of those gray stitches. And then watch as I get to about this point. It comes back over to the middle, starts doing the red stitches, gets rid of that flower, gets rid of that middle piece. And then right around here somewhere, and I kind of go slowly when I start getting, notice what that did. As I made it to about that point, I've now hidden about half of these stitches. Well, that's going to make this much easier to select just that element, because again, if I've hidden them, either by unchecking the color or by using my sliders, if they're hidden, I can't select them. So now it's very easy for me to copy that element. Let me go ahead and turn everything back on. Now let's build one little design to see how we could use this. So for this, I first want to isolate just this bottom piece. So I'm going to start by, in this case, I'm going to get rid of everything that I don't want. So I'm going to uncheck color number 2. So that's hidden. And I know I want to get rid of everything here at the bottom. So I've got to be really careful. I'm going to go really close here. I would probably zoom in normally and use the freehand point select tool, but I think I can get it. So I've selected those. I'm going to click delete. And now I want to hide my grays for a second, and I'm going to get rid of these 3 top flowers. Again, with that freehand select, I'm just going to lasso around what I want to select. Then I could either copy it, or I'm going to click delete to get rid of it. Now I'm left with this little branch here and this little branch here. But because I'm working at the stitch level, I can reposition these by selecting them. So if I do a little lasso and select this, then maybe I'm going to drag it over here to close that gap. Then I can lasso around these 2 pieces. Notice you are seeing some of those jump stitches between those areas, but those won't be there when I go back to my 3D mode. So now I'm going to click the arrow up the top to flip that. Position, no, I don't think I like that. I was going to try it down here, but I don't think I like that. So I'm going to flip it again, and I bet that will nest pretty nicely right down there. So I'm going to use the arrow keys on my keyboard to kind of fine-tune that into position. And I like that. So now let me come back over to the Home tab. Now I've built this element, and I bet we can make something out of it with just maybe a nice Encore. So I'm going to go over to the Encore tab, and let's try this with, say, well, let's experiment. Let's start with 3 repeats. Pull those together, and I've made a nice little element there. With 2 repeats, I get that. And so I just start experimenting until I find something that I think makes a nice combination. And it may be that I have to try multiple pieces to really get it down to what I want. I think maybe let's try 4. That's a nice little frame. I kind of like the way that interplays. But I want to do one other thing here. So I'm going to cancel that for a minute. I'm going to go to the Home tab and copy that. Now let's go ahead and I'm going to do that Encore to 4 again and apply that. Then I'm going to paste this back in. And I bet if I come in here, looks like that'll probably fit in that little corner. So I'm going to use one more Encore. I'm going to go Encore this time to the hoop. And when I go to the hoop, it's going to try and space one out. Well, if I click preview, we can see what it does. Well, actually, it worked really nice because there wasn't enough room here between the designs. So when I encored the hoop, because the design was large enough, it just pushed it into my corners. And I'm working here in a 120 by 120 hoop. So that actually fit really nicely. So when you start playing with this, sometimes you'll be surprised at some of the patterns that happen when you just experiment and try different things. I like that a lot. So I'm going to click the green check mark to apply, go back to my Home tab. I'll click outside so we can see that and maybe go to the life view. And I think we've taken that and made a really nice piece out of that design. So I would encourage you to maybe bring this design into your software, go to the Modify tab, and try some different things. Edit maybe one different part of it or a couple of parts, encore them, and find out what kind of things you can create with this design. And I would love to see what you do. I hope you've learned a little something today, and I'll see you next time. Thank you very much.